bit, okay? So, the first simple information about this is that it's a book written by Paul to a church in Philippi, and Paul was writing this book when he was in prison. He was behind bars, writing a letter of encouragement or support to this particular group of followers of Jesus. So that's the first thing. Paul began this letter by thanking them for their partnership in the midst of the gospel. And that week, at the end of the service, I had you all say thank you to one another. And so I'm going to have you do that now. I want you to look to the person next to you or behind you, in front of you, and I want you to say, I'm thankful for you again. Every time it works. Every time I ask you to say thank you to one another, you all have smiles on your face. So maybe we're going to have to do this every week. I'll have you say I'm thankful for one another because y'all are going to have smiles on your face after we're done. So great. So that's what Paul did, right? He wrote a letter basically saying thank you. Thanking them for the ways that this church financially supported Paul's missionary journey. And so that was the second thing. The next week, we talked about how Paul invited us to live humble lives, to have the humility of Christ, that we should regard someone else as being better than ourselves, that we should lift up the people around us instead of always lifting up ourselves. And we learned about this from an attitude of Christ, that Christ was the model for us for this humility. And then last week, we talked about how we only earn salvation, that we only have a relationship with God because of faith. We can't do enough actions or deeds or stuff to earn God's love, but the only way that we earn God's love is because God first loved us, and that we can have faith in God in return, and that once we have Christ, we are to live our life in a manner worthy of the gospel. And I really sense that that's the theme of the book, one of them, is that we should live our life in a manner worthy of the gospel. So today, we're going to finish the third chapter of Philippians. But I have to start off by asking one of the biggest life questions that I have. Okay? Maybe you won't agree with this, but this is a huge life question I have. And the question goes like this. Who actually enjoys running? Okay. So does any of you run here? Any runners, right? Two, right? What? Used to. When you were younger, right? Hunter runs. I see his hand up, right? Jennifer Lynn is raising her hand, right? Now Arrow is. The kid's running, right? But who actually enjoys running? Now, throughout my adult years, I have dabbled with running on and off. I dabbled so much that I've raced twice, and I've gotten 2 medals through my racing, right? But I'll tell you, this is free information. They're only participation medals. It literally says here, finisher. So I received an award for finishing, right? And I received 2 of them, so I'm quite proud of these. So I wanted to bring them to show you today. And I raced this race twice in Philadelphia, at the Philadelphia Philly Stadium for their charity race. So my sister and I, we ran this race twice, and I can say I've run 2 races and got 2 medals for participation. But I have run on and off, and every time I'm running, to be honest, I always think, who actually enjoys this, right? I often ask myself, how far longer do I have to go? Do I have to keep going? And I'm never in the moment worried about where I'm at. I'm always thinking about where I'm going, right? Like, how much longer till I see my house, right? Or sometimes when I'm running, I have goals, simple goals that might go like this. I hope I can run today without stopping. Or I hope I can run to the church without stopping from my house, right? It's only like 0.6 miles, right? I should be able to do that. But always when I'm running, I'm always thinking about the end. I'm always thinking about the end goal. Now, this is really just a fun question. But when I think about running, I think about what Paul is doing in chapter 3. And I think running is a perfect illustration of life. All of our lives start at point A, when we're born. And all of our lives end at point B, when we die. And that's just like running. When you begin a race, you start at point A, and the goal is to get to point B, hopefully is the finish line, having survived. And I think it's a perfect image for life. We start at point A, and we're trying to get to point B. Paul uses, I think, this image to talk also about our Christian life. When we're in our Christian journey, when we start our faith, how should we continue living our life? What should our life, what should the journey that we're on from point A to point B be like? What is that process like for a Christian? And I think that comes from, or we can read a little bit of this in Philippians 3, verses 12 to 14. So let us relook at these verses. So Paul says, "Not that I have already attained this or have already reached the goal, but I press on to make it my own because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Beloved, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but this one thing I do. Forgetting what lies behind and straining to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus." So this is kind of what Paul is saying here, right? He begins by saying that he has not obtained the goal, that he has not gotten to the goal of getting to point B yet. He hasn't arrived yet. And that kind of goal was from last week, of having this perfect faith, this perfect understanding of the resurrection of Christ Jesus. That he, Paul, has not fully grasped it yet. So Paul very clearly said that he has not made it yet to perfection, that he has not reached the goal yet. I think one reason why Paul named this is I think he was specifically talking about a group of people that are called Gnostic Christians. And these Gnostic Christians were living in this city or in this place in Philippi, and the Gnostic Christians believed this, that they were perfect, that they had figured out it all. Now here's my question. Has anyone figured out yet? Is anyone perfect yet? Okay, good, because I'm not either. And so that's what Paul was speaking up against, because there was this group of people who believed that they were perfect. And Paul is trying to say, well, Paul, isn't even perfect, that he has not even reached the goal yet. Because this goal for Paul, when he went from a Jew to a Christian, the goal became much higher for him. And the goal was no longer just following the laws, but the goal for Paul was living a life with complete union and understanding with Jesus Christ. So, Paul went on, and he said, he was no longer going to choose to what was behind him. Paul chooses to not look back, but instead, Paul looks forward. So he's not looking back of the old ways, but he's looking forward. He's keeping his eyes ahead for us. And I really sense Paul saying this. Paul is wanting to let go of the past, letting go of what was behind and trying to look forward. So I have to ask, because I think this is a really important question. But what things in our life, or what things in our past, do we have to let go of? What things in our past, or things that lie behind us, how are they holding us back? How are they holding us captive? How are they holding us back so we couldn't move ahead? So this could be a mistake, a particular sin, or it could simply be hurt and disappointment. It could be with someone else, or often it's just within us. Things that are holding us captive. And so when I think about language, what Paul says, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I wonder, what do we need to let go of, even today, so we can listen to the rest of the sermon, so that we can even look forward, so we can see what else God has for us in our life. Because what Paul is looking for, the goal for Paul, is a life of heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus. What does that mean? A life in complete union in heaven with God. So what is holding us back from keeping our eyes on the heavenly focus of God? It's interesting, John Wesley, one of the founders of the Methodist Church, he actually believed that Christian perfection, being perfect on this side of heaven, was a possibility. Right? He actually believed that someone on this side of heaven could actually be perfect, to live their life in a completely perfect Christian way. But this is the interesting thing. He was always skeptical of someone who said that they were perfect. And like the old adage goes, something like this, that the mark of true perfection is someone who says that they have not yet reached perfection, right? And so I say that because the goal in our life, I think the goal of our Christian life, is to live a life that's growing in maturity, that's growing in perfection. That is our goal in life. We're seeking and moving there. We're reaching for that goal of perfection. But it's interesting about the race that we all live in our life. Races that I have run, when I received a finisher award, the goal of this race was a competitor race, right? It was competition, right? Who can run the fastest and cross the line first? But I think the race that we all live, the race of our life, is not a competition. It's not who will be perfect the quickest, or who will have it all together the best. I don't think that's, our Christian life isn't a competition. But instead, I think our journey is one where we are all equally trying to finish the line well. So, it almost goes, I think, it almost feels like a participation trophy, right? People hate participation trophies today. We hear a lot about that, right? We shouldn't give out participation trophies for someone who just played the game. But I feel like that in the Christian world, right? That if we're all equally participating in life on the race to get to heaven, I think our participation trophy will be seeing Jesus face to face. And I think it's a pretty good participation award. But I also think about this with our race. I think our life is not a sprint, but a marathon. Now, this is a model that Hannah and I use a lot in our marriage and in our life. We often talk about how our life is not a sprint, but our life should be a marathon. Or that our ministry should be a marathon, not a sprint. And we often talk about this, and this is why we talk about it. Hannah and I have this tendency to go really quickly. To go through life and accomplish everything so quickly, and to cross everything off our to-do list, and try to just get there so quickly and solve every problem in the world quickly, right? But what happens when you do that? What happens?
You miss a lot.
You miss a lot, and what else? Wear yourself out, and anything else. What was that? You make mistakes, right? And I often think about this in our Christian journey as well. That I think the Christian journey is more of a marathon. It's a little longer of a journey. It's not a sprint to see if you can get to perfection the quickest, but it's this marathon of life. And what I mean by that as well is that we all have time left in our life to grow in our faith. That we have not finished the crossing line yet, the finish line yet. And so how do we slow down? How we reflect and think and journey about the race, the life that's still before us. Because it's a marathon. There's more of a journey left. And like we just said, how do we not miss it? Wear ourselves out. So how do we keep on going? Keep on pressing on towards the goal of our heavenly goal and life of being with God in perfection. So let us read Philippians 3:17, 4 to 1 as well. This is what Paul continues to say. Brothers and sisters, join in imitating me and observe those who live according to the example you have in us. For many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. I have often told you of them, and now I tell you even with tears. Their end is destruction. Their God is the belly, and their glory is in their shame. Their minds are set on earthly things. But our citizenship is in heaven. And it's from there that we are expecting a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. He will transform the body of our humiliation, that it may be conformed to to the body of his glory, by the power that also enables him to make all things subject to himself. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, my beloved. So Paul begins by saying, join in imitating me, or someone else who's modeled it well for us. So I wonder, who would you say is the model Christian in your life? Or who is the person that you aspire to be in faith? Or who is someone who impresses you with their Christian life? Who is that person? And what Paul would say is to imitate them. To do the things that they are doing. To maybe model your life after theirs. If you believe or if you sense that they are someone who is living a life in a manner worthy of the gospel. And Paul doesn't want us to really think about them. He doesn't want us to really talk about them with one another. But he wants us to imitate them. He wants us to live our life like theirs. And he says that because there are people that are living as enemies of the gospel, he says. And these are the people who their God is their belly. What image, right? Their God is their belly, or their glory is in their shame, and their minds are set on earthly things. And these were enemies of the church. These were people who were both inside the faith, and these were people who were outside, and they were enemies. They wanted to terrorize everything of God. And so Paul wants us to imitate the people that we revere and respect, because they're enemies of the church. But how he finishes this, by not just saying that they're enemies, but that our citizenship, that our relationship, that we should celebrate that our citizenship is in heaven. That a part of, I think, what it means to be a church, that I think what it means to have four walls like we do and to come here, is to remember and to remind ourselves that we are part of a colony of heaven on earth. That like the church can be seen as a colony of heaven. We're just on this side of heaven at this moment. I think why it's a colony of heaven is that I think if we are imitating Christ, imitating Paul, imitating those people that we really value, that we can give a glimpse of heaven to people here on earth. So what would it look like for this to be the case? Now here's the thing. I had breakfast with a couple of senior high people from our church. I'm confused here. I had breakfast with a couple of our senior high youth this past week. Let me just be clear. And I talked to them about the shooting in Texas. Right? So we all heard about the shooting last week in Texas at the church. But this conversation evolved, and we talked about other things like terror attacks that are happening now, and just violence all over the place. And I asked them a very specific question. And I asked them, do you think it's going to get better? And is there hope? And you know what they quickly said? What do you think they quickly said? No. They said no. Now here's the thing. I've been thinking about that reaction since Thursday morning at 6:30 when we had breakfast. I've been thinking about their response. And this is my challenge or conviction or struggle this morning that I want to share with you. If our citizenship is in heaven, if we are to be imitators of Paul, if we're to be imitators of the people that we revere, what is going on in our world? What is going on in our churches? And what is going on in our personal lives? So my question and my challenge is not for anyone else but us this morning, because you're all my captive audience. You're the people I get to talk to on a Sunday morning. My question for us is, how should we live? Let's be basic. How should we live? How should we live that we are all pressing toward the goal of heaven? That we're striving to be more Christ-like, that we are boldly proud of being part of the kingdom of heaven, and that we can stand firm in Christ. How should we live so that this life and the evil and the problems of the world will be reduced. I know that there is going to be evil until Christ comes back. We know that. We're a fallen, sinful world. But maybe I'm young and naive and hopeful that we could be a part of change here. We could be part of change around the world. So how can we live our life as we run the race to the point of year? How can we live our lives so that the people around us can have hope? So that when I talk to the senior high youth again and they can tell me, maybe it can be different. Because I'm optimistic like that, but it was a good dose of realism. So how should we live our life? So we often talk about financial planning, or we plan for our future. We're planning, very specific things for our future, for retirement, those kind of things. But today, I want us to think about planning for our spiritual lives. In 5 years, or 20 years, or 50 years, however much life you have left, how do you want your faith to be communicated and shared in your own life, but also in those around you? How do you truly want to experience pressing on towards the goal right now? Because we have more life to live, don't we? The marathon of our life is not over yet. So how will we run the rest of our race? Let us pray. God, this morning I have to lift up brothers and sisters of places in Texas, a small community that was victimized last Sunday. Could I also think about terror that has happened in places like New York City? Can I also think about the pain and struggle that some of us are facing in our own lives? So God, in this moment, I lift up believing in you because you're the only place I'm putting my trust, oh God. You're the one thing in this world, oh God, that I don't think fails us. And so God, as we think about the rest of life that we have to live, God, would you guide us and lead us to live a life? Maybe, God, live a better life. Live a life that's more committed to you. So God, we give you our life. We give you our lives so that you will lead and guide us today. But God, just don't lead us and guide us today, but lead us in the future so we can reflect your love and your grace. God, may we put our trust in hope. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. So before we go to our last song, it's really brief, but when I was praying this week for hope, when I was praying this week for the future, I thought of the song Victory in Jesus. And so I believe that we will have victory in Jesus, and may this be our hopeful song to sing as we leave today, that we can have victory in Jesus in our life. So let us stand and sing Psalm 370, Victory in Jesus.
I
So all I'm asking you as you leave today is to remember that we have victory in Jesus. So as we run the race of our life, whatever life we have left to live, may we not forget that we have victory in Jesus alone.
Amen.
That's the truth for us today. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen.
Amen.